Welcome to CoBB, Conversations on the Business of Brands with Sudeep Chawla and Sharavana Raghavan.
Sudeep, I've been talking to a few marketers recently, and the last 4 or 5 months haven't been great. In the Indian economy, there has been a little bit of a slowdown for a lot of businesses, and marketers seem to be getting a lot of flack within the organizations. And these are lowly brand managers who don't really have too much control about what they're doing, but they're held accountable for something that they don't directly control. So they have a lot of responsibility without any control. And one of them was asking me, so see, this accountability and being challenged within the system is okay, but I'm here at this time. So I can only learn by doing, but most of the organizations today are saying, don't do this, don't do that, with very little avenues to do anything. So you are a CMO, and I want to ask you this question. Is there a kind of marketing where marketers can continue to learn, experiment, demonstrate authority without having to go through this cycle every now and then?
So, see, I haven't worked in a D2C setup, so I'm not sure about the specific dynamics there. I'm sure there are learning opportunities there as well. But where I have worked in the last decade or so, and I'm currently in that space as well, is something what I call as B2B2C business, right?
Yeah, we have spoken about this lightly in
We
the
had,
past, I remember.
we had.
So, okay. So,
Yeah. So let me first define what is
yes,
B2B2C, right?
yes.
It's simply a business or a category where companies, make a product or a service that is used by intermediaries to provide or to offer something of value to end consumers.
Okay. So, if I were to take it back to our previous conversation on this, I remember you saying that even the retailers in regular FMCG context are part of this recommendation of the influencer group. But if I were to expand it, so you worked with Pidilite and now with Syntex. So who exactly makes up the circle in a proper B2B2C category? And in a sense, why would they matter more than a regular retailer will for, say, somebody like a Cadbury or a Unilever?
So in an FMCG setup, a retailer, a distributor, a wholesaler, etc., are all intermediaries. There is no doubt about that, because your stock finally flows through that pipeline to reach the consumer. But
Right.
none of them really adds any value to the stock except displaying it, right?
Correct.
Their
Right.
value addition is fairly limited. Now, when it comes to B2B2C categories, and let me first give an example of categories like cement, paint, electric cables, stuff like that. These are categories that obviously finally serve the consumer, the end consumer,
Right.
but the intermediaries add value to it. And when I say intermediaries, I'm talking about people like architects, engineers, contractors, plumbers, electricians, painters, etc., contractors, right? These are people who are going to buy your product, turn it into some kind of a finished good for the consumer,
Right.
which the consumer can hopefully either appreciate or derive some value from, right? The consumer is not consuming your product in the form that you are selling it.
Right. But let me intervene there. Let's take Fevicol, for example. As a customer, as an end customer, I'm probably not using Fevicol.
Yeah.
But I am still marketed to by Fevicol, right? I keep seeing these Fevicol ads. They're very, really famous ads like we've spoken about on the show. So how does that kind of change in the B2C? Because I don't see it as any different.
In that context, your question raises a very interesting aspect. Why are you being marketed to if Fevicol really is not being used by you, or you're not even going to see the Fevicol after it has been used?
Right.
Right. So the fact is that, we must understand the role of advertising in these categories.
Okay.
Yeah. In an FMCG, you advertise to move one of the three matrices amongst consumers, which is
Right.
either salience or mind measures, and therefore both of them lead towards behavior. Yeah. So that's the role that you see of advertising, and thereby consumer takes action, buys your brand or a product and consumes it.
Right.
In these categories, since the consumer is not going to consume your product directly, the role of advertising to the consumers actually is to inform the discussion that's going to happen between the consumer and the intermediary.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
So usually what happens in these categories is that consumer expresses the desire that I want to paint my house, I want to build my house, etc., and
Right.
then takes suggestions from people he or she thinks are more expert at suggesting. So therefore intermediaries become a very important part of the decision making cycle. Also, it is the intermediary who is going to use the product, and therefore them vouching for the performance of the product becomes very critical
Because they're going to give the finished goods to the customer.
consumer.
Got
Also
it.
the consumer, all Indian consumers, I think consumers worldwide, want to have somebody handy that they can go back to if there is any problem, at least in the short term.
Right.
Right. So therefore the intermediary is that person who says, don't worry, I stand guarantee of what I've done. If there's any problem, please talk to me, I'll come and solve it. Right.
Right.
So
Right.
that's the space where these categories operate, and hence there is a intermediary who plays a primal role in not just adding value to your goods, but also becoming a guarantor of quality performance to the consumer, and hence they become supremely important.
Right.
But some of these categories, some of the brands still choose to advertise because they want to create preference amongst consumers and better inform the discussions that are happening between the consumer and the intermediary.
Right.
And that's one of the reasons, Sharan, that you see very few categories, very few brands in these categories advertising. Right? There are roughly about, if not more, about 100, white glue brands in India.
Wow.
Right? Only a couple of them advertise. Right? And similar is for everything. So, I've worked with waterproofing. It's the same scene there.
Okay.
Worked with, you've heard of paints. You see top
Right.
4, 5, 6 paints advertising.
Right.
There'll be hundreds of paints brands that don't advertise. Right? And same cases everywhere. You look at pipes, you look at water tanks, everywhere.
So from what you're saying, I get it that you advertise for the end consumer as well as for the intermediaries. Right. So I could be wrong, but correct me if I'm wrong. A lot of marketers or a lot of the businesses tend to underestimate the role of the intermediaries stakeholders. In the sense that managing them is kind of sent away to the sales department, saying it's not marketing's job. Does it happen? If it does, why does it happen?
In this case, in these categories, it doesn't happen as often.
Okay.
What I've seen companies do is choose one of the intermediary and depend heavily on them.
Okay.
Yeah. In many of these categories, for example, your dealer also is a significant intermediary. Right.
Okay. Got it.
So
Okay.
therefore, a lot of the companies super over index on them, and then do a little bit of holding job on the others. So that's something that company choose. There are companies that will say, okay, leave the dealer. I'll super over index on, say, for example, architects or engineer, etc.
Right.
Depending on, how the chain of command flows in your business and what's the conviction of the company about where it can create discernible advantage over others. That's how companies operate in this space.
So let me bring it back to the original question. Why is B2B2C a great avenue for marketers to learn material of the environment of the business?
Okay. So the reason I wanted to talk about this is to bring about some aspects of this category, which will just open this up to all the listeners who are listening to this podcast. This category otherwise is considered very boring.
Yeah.
Yeah. All of these are non-glamorous things, dirty shops, and consumers not really caring about these categories, etc. But there are 2-3 things that are very important, right? So one, I have already desold the category by saying that your advertising is focusing on only one, end consumer who does not even play that important a part.
Right.
So therefore, all your ATL components, which is your TVC, DVC, print, outdoor, etc., have
the most attractive part of marketing you've taken out already.
I have taken out already. Yeah, the more glamorous, I'll not say attractive, glamorous part of right
Fair.
now. But this category, and the reason I fell in love with this category is because of 2-3 big reasons.
Mhm.
The first is that most of these intermediary, apart from say engineers and architects who study in schools and colleges, etc., the rest of them have all graduated from the like in my previous company, Mr. Bharat Puri used to say this: the school of hard knocks. They've all learned by doing, or
Life lessons.
life lessons, or they have learned by apprenticeship. So the ustad would teach his disciples, and then they'll grow, they'll become ustads of their own. Then all of them will learn from the school of hard knocks, or
Right.
they will learn by doing, make mistakes, find ways around, etc., etc. Right? And because they do and learn, all of them have very customized syllabus of learning.
Right.
There's no universal one syllabus of engineering there, right?
Hmm.
And hence you will find that their ways of working, their practices, everything, usage, etc., is very different in different parts of the country. Anyways, India is a fairly diverse country. Your geographical variations bring about significant changes in these categories, where your quality of water, quality of air, quality of construction material, proximity to water, the water table, temperature variation, etc., etc.,
Right.
create significant differences in in the construction techniques, the technique tools and techniques that people use, etc., etc. And therefore there is extreme diversity and variety, right, in this category.
So you said there's differences because geographical variance.
Yeah.
So does that also affect the way the people train and the practices that they adopt for themselves, as in the customized curriculum that's developed?
Yeah.
That also is influenced by, you mean, the weather and the
Yeah, of
situation that
course.
they're in?
Of course. Yeah, one of the commonest examples that I use when I talk to anybody about the diversity in India is that when you build a home, the construction of roof is one of the key parts of it, right? Everybody builds a roof,
Right.
right? Now the roof construction itself is so very customized in India. Different people in different parts of the country build it very differently. You go to say in Punjab, Haryana, etc., those places use a technique called matfaska,
Okay.
that is supposed to give good degree of insulation to
From
the
the heat.
roof, right, from the heat. So therefore they use animal fodder, dried animal fodder mixed with mud to lay on the basic roof slab, and then they cover it up with thin roof tiles, etc. You move, and they will use some bitumen under it. You move slightly downwards, you will start seeing people using what is called a brickbat koba, right? It's another technique where skilled workers lay down bricks in circular manner on the roof, and that's how they construct the roof, right? You move eastwards towards Kolkata, etc., they construct what is called as jol chat, right? The jol chat has a thin mixture of cement concrete along with some small stones that are laid there, right?
Okay.
So the same thing, the brickbat koba in south is called brick jalli, and they do it slightly more differently, right?
Right.
So each geography, when you go to Kerala, for example, now Kerala roofs, there is a significant tradition of using roofs for various festivals and other purposes, for drying things, etc. So they will always finish the roof with some kind of a white coating, a white cement or some other kind of coating, or these days they've started putting up those trusses, the truss roofs, etc. So each one of these geographies has some nuances, cultural, climatic, etc. East has a lot of government buildings. The English used to construct a lot of those buildings with limestones.
Okay.
Limestones keep things, they're light, and they keep things cool. But limestone has another property. Limestone eats into any chemical that comes into contact with it.
Oh, okay.
So therefore, the way you coat the roofs in East is very different. So therefore, each part of India has very peculiarities to their construction techniques. And these are just few examples that I'm using.
Absolutely. It kind of reminds me of a project I worked on for fencing poles.
Fencing poles.
You've seen the kambas, where the barbed wires put on sometimes it's called chain link fence. And
Yeah.
so I was working on that. And we're trying to figure out what the market is for it. And we decided it was going to be the agricultural market. And we realized the contractor who does the installation of the poles is the biggest influencer there.
Yeah.
In the sense, the biggest problem also for this brand, because the contractor, wherever they're available, they make their own cement poles.
Yeah.
So they will not let somebody else come in. And these poles were like, I think 2 or 3x of what the cement poles were. So we actually had to divide the market into 3, saying there are markets like MP and Orissa, where the farmers were the landowners, were the buyers of the poles and the installers of the poles. So the contractors were in there. But we could the difficulty was to get them to upgrade. It was very expensive for them because they were not very large land parcel owners.
Yeah.
In Kerala, which on paper was the biggest market because it had a number of farms which had rich people owning these lands.
Yeah.
But none of them live there. It's all completely controlled by the contractor.
They're all
He
in
buys,
Gulf.
the contractor buys and contractor does the installation. So technically, there's no opportunity market for us. Markets like Gujarat, Maharashtra, Tamil Nadu, where the land parcels were large enough, the farmers were well off, where they will buy the poles, all the infrastructure for themselves.
Yeah.
And the contractor will do the installation.
Correct.
Because they were paying for installation, it's easy to get them to upgrade.
Correct.
So this was, and
so these nuances,
little nuances make all the difference in how you plan the market. I think resonates exactly with what you just said.
Correct.
So, but you would also have this, right?
So this is one. For example, the local practices, customs, etc.
Local players?
So that leads to more local players. Because the local players thrive on local knowledge, their ability to customize their product offering, etc. And since a lot of them don't have national ambition, that is what they double down on.
Exactly. Like the contractor we were talking about.
Correct. So the B2B2C category will have significantly more customized local players.
Okay. This is not helping the marketer's cause right now.
No, it is. I'll tell you how.
Marketers are supposed to have an approach to market, develop the instincts for the market, and also this kind of puts paid to all of it.
I'll tell you how. So that's the second part. So first is diverse techniques. Number 2 is localized competition. The third part and the most interesting part is, if you remember, we have spoken about this a lot, where we tell the marketers, you are not your brand's consumer. Go and meet the consumer, understand them better, and hopefully don't go meet your own friends and family. If you don't have money to recruit consumers, go to dealers, see who comes and buys, or talk to friends of friends, etc. Somebody who has 2 degrees or 3 degrees of separation from you. Yeah? We've spoken about all of this. But still, intuitively, we start building what we call as hyper empathy for consumers after you've met them for a little, for a few times.
Right.
These categories, when you're talking about people like, plumbers, electricians, etc., is possibly the most underpenetrated segment by Indian researchers.
Right.
Right. Very little is known about them. You can't intuitively empathize with them. Right. You haven't lived that life. You haven't seen their life. You don't know where they're coming from, what their motivations, fears, joys, and sorrows are. So therefore, that makes the life even more interesting, that these consumers are not intuitive, right? So 3 different facets that makes this B2B2C category very different, very diverse, and very non-intuitive.
I'm hearing when you say very different, diverse, non-intuitive, I'm only hearing difficult, more difficult, very difficult. Where are you taking this from?
So there's no copybook framework, right? But what this leads to, and which is something that must excite marketers all across, is the opportunity for micro marketing. Right? You can, since there is so much variation, so much variety, you can actually divide your market into micro segments. Each micro segment with its own unique insight and therefore a unique response from you in terms of proposition, activation, etc., right? So therefore, there are infinite opportunities for brand managers, marketers, etc., to create these smaller micro segments and keep experimentation in each of these micro segments via all the tools that are available to you, right? So, when you do marketing in FMCG, you, almost everything in a brand manager's life revolves around the brand campaigns.
Usually, yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So now these days, because of digital, etc., you might have a more continuous, more salient brand campaign, but that campaign becomes very critical, right?
Right.
And it's a nuclear launch. Push the button and then it's gone, right?
Right.
Then you learn from it and then you come back, whatever, how many ever months later, right?
Right.
Or if you're, a digital brand that is doing smaller campaigns, you might do alpha, beta, but that's how you go. So that one big opportunity is where you learn from, and then the next learning cycle starts. Here, in these categories, because of these micro segments and micro marketing, you're getting infinite opportunities at the same time to learn. And because this target segment is quite forgiving, they are not media over exposed, they're not somebody that the whole world is falling over. They keep giving you chances after chances to get it right.
Okay. I think the cost is also lower for the mistakes that you make.
So obviously it's a smaller segment, more targeted segment, right? The sort of media that you ride upon is also not as expensive because you're not doing mass media where you don't even know where your consumer is. So that mass media is spray and pray,
Right.
right? This is where you're going very specific. You will possibly try and influence all kind of touch points, physical and digital.
Got it.
Right? Physical touch points like your dealer shops, congregation points, yeah, Naka. In every town has a Naka where you find these workers, etc., hanging around in the morning before somebody picks them up.
Got it.
You can do digital outreach, etc., etc. All of those are your touch points. But since the numbers are small, you can afford to do multiple variations and keep going back, right? But by doing micro segmentation.
Okay. So you're saying because the feedback is faster, you learn faster, learn more?
Not because the feedback is faster. In fact, there is zero feedback if you don't invest time and attention to it. Right? You would have to go and seek feedback. You would have to sense the feedback, right? With people's body language, the way whether you've been able to influence. Like we say, what do marketers do? Marketers influence finally the beliefs and attitudes of people.
Right.
So whether you've been able to influence that belief and attitude, you'll get to know, but only when you observe them, right?
Got it.
That's the lead indicator. The lag indicator obviously is sales, and but by the time sales gives you the feedback, you're too late. So you have to catch the lead indicators. So if you really want to learn, and you're a marketer that is intent on learning, what you have to do is you have to invest significant effort, right? First into learning the process of marketing, the core process of marketing, and then putting it into practice by doing it over and over again with many of these micro segments, right?
So
that's the process.
Yeah, so you're saying this micro marketing is the best way for a marketer to learn, provided they're willing to put in the effort.
Yeah.
Let me put you on the spot.
Okay.
You moved from B2C to B2B2C.
Yes.
From Cadbury to Pidilite, and you continued that with Syntex also.
Yeah.
So what has been your biggest aha moment that you realized after getting into this business?
I think the first thing that I said, there is no one India. There's just so many Indias, and very few brands in FMCG today recognize that. Now with advent of a lot of startups, I'm seeing that a lot of them are recognizing this specific insight about India, the diversity, and therefore they're happy serving few segments here and there. Diversity, and how can a marketer address this diversity? How can it completely, each micro segment is microcosm of the entire marketing activity,
right?
From insight generation to uh, you know FAB creation, to proposition to creation, to testing the articulation of proposition, to finally putting the final articulation, to finally taking it to the consumer, then finally taking the feedback, and then completing the loop again. Each element, this is what we do in marketing. So each element of this marketing process each micro segment is a representative of that. So that's the sort of aha that came to me. And that's why I really love doing what I do.
No, it's beautifully put, because I'm sure a lot of marketers go through this diversity within India.
Yeah.
But I think in B2B2C, one, there is a lack of pre-defined information for you to build on. And it is also that this is a little more diverse than just consumer mindsets that we talk of. But okay, you said micro marketing is a great place to learn, provided you put in the effort and understand the process. Now, can you expand on that? If I'm a marketer getting into the B2B2C space, I want to get out of here at some point, but how am I to maximize my learning in the time I have in B?
No, I think more than me saying that you maximize it in minimum amount of time, because I don't want people to think that there's a shortcut to it. There isn't. There's
Right.
significant hard work. I would say there are 3 enabling factors. Some of them are in your hands, some of them not so much, but 3 enabling factors that I can think about. The first is that you have to look past the non-glamorous image of the category, of
Right.
categories, and recognize the opportunity that it offers, and then put significant sincerity behind your effort. There's no reason why you should not be able to learn. Of course, all of this is a formula for learning in any industry, but this one requires you to look past the non-glamorous image to start with.
Got it.
So that's the first one.
Okay.
The second one becomes significantly more important in this category, in these kind of categories. And this is a word that I picked up from the lexicon we used to use at Pidilite. It's called intellectual humility. Right? Intellectual humility proposes to you that there is infinitesimal more information in the world than you can possibly know, and hence always be intellectually humble and learn from everybody that you meet becomes immensely important in this category, because you tend to meet blue collared workers, people who are not educated at all, who will not be able to articulate what they feel very easily, and it is easy to dismiss them. These are people that you dismiss every day when they come to your home, right?
Very true.
But if you want to learn from them, you would have to sit, ask questions, understand what they're saying, etc., and really empathize with them. Not an easy one. Takes effort, takes practice, but really worth it.
Yeah, it requires a complete mindset change, right?
Yeah.
How you approach them.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Third one? Third,
obviously, is another enabling function that possibly, sometimes is in your hand, sometimes isn't. That in this process, in this entire process, you might lose yourself to, significant activity here and there. So you need a marketing leader who can, give you the initial learning, create the right frameworks for you so that you know why you are doing what you're doing. Right. And then, and therefore you are able to review yourself and review along with the marketing leader so that your learnings keep getting crystallized. Yeah. Your learning cycles are, become productive. You're able to, you're asked the right questions so that you are able to ponder over and keep improving the activity that you're doing, and you're not stuck in an endless loop.
Beautiful, Sudeep. I think this is one of the most important episodes we've had on CoBB, because given the environment and given not just in India, even globally, the marketing team as such is facing a lot of flack and is kind of being reduced in its importance. And the way you framed it, saying in B2B2C, there are so many micro markets. And if marketers in this domain can focus on getting their work right for each micro market, experiment, learn fast, and put in the effort, they can actually learn a lot more. And all they need to do is have the maturity to acknowledge the lack of glamour in the category most of the time. Have the humility, the intellectual humility, like you put it, to learn from people who you otherwise might think are placed lesser than you in the social strata. You might not be willing to even give them a second look most of the time. And third, hope and pray you have a great boss who helps you learn.
Correct. Well summarized.
Thank you for listening to CoBB, Conversations on the Business of Brands with Sudeep Chawla and Sharavana Raghavan. Subscribe and learn more at cobcast.net.